It was an insane ride. What did you guys think?
Near you, Luke. He's gonna go first. I have a
I'll
little bit of a
start.
rant, but yeah. So if you want to leave the rant for the
That's
second
fine. I'll
person,
start here
yeah,
because I think mine's not going to be too crazy. I'm sure we're all kind of in the same vein here, but this was a joy to binge. I had a really good time. Finishing the second season made me reevaluate a lot of thoughts about the future of this show, and
yeah,
not going to be a completely rosy view of the whole show as a whole. Like I have some nitpicks, and I'm sure we probably are going to bring up the same sort of things here. But in terms of character work, I said it last podcast. I probably said it 100 times through the first season's coverage. These are some of my favorite characters of any of the Netflix originals where the character work is just fantastic. Like I love the chemistry on screen of some of these actors. It is very reminiscent of like the magicians. It feels like these guys are friends and like I can feel that enjoyment through the screen. And that's pretty much what carries me through the show and why I like it a lot, totally because of the characters, mostly held down by the crows, and also our new Nikolai in season two has been an all-star. So I'll talk more about him as we go through it. But one thing I wanted to say that I'm really surprised about is how quick this show has been going. While the pacing has probably been considered pretty good for most like average TV watchers, and I'm sure it actually probably helps with analytics and getting people to finish the show because so many different things happen every single episode. It does feel like we're nonstop sprinting throughout this whole thing. And that's where I have a little bit of a hesitation. And it might even be a hot take where I'm saying that things are happening too quick because this story is at its roots, it's based on a fantasy series, like a fantasy book series. And when I listen, read, or watch anything to do with fantasy, I have a different lens than most other types of shows. And I kind of feel like that this show, where this show shines with the characters, it suffers in the world building and background details of like what really usually makes sci-fi, fantasy, like these type of things work and connect deeply with me. With that being said, like it's not that a lot of the power systems and the small science versus magic, like it's not that it's bad. It just isn't explored to the level that I thought we were going to get to. And so it kind of leaves me with a bunch of plot hole questions. And then, like, is it a plot hole versus they just didn't explain it? A bunch of those things. That's where a lot of my nitpicks are going to come into play. But again, when it comes to the characters, they were fantastic. But some of the bigger picture stuff happened a little bit too quick, especially with Kiergan no longer going to be a part of the show. I'm pretty sure we're at the end of Alina's storyline in the books. So now we're kind of off book things. And now it's going to get pretty down to how the writers decide to proceed forward. I don't know. It feels like we're basically at square one because the Fold and Kiergan are gone. Okay, we have this new drug that's probably going to be the face of season two and connect the crows back to Alina and all that stuff. And that's interesting, but it does feel like it feels like we're starting like a part two of this world, and I don't even feel like we got enough of part one because we sprinted through it all. But with that being said, that was my little rant, Jimmy. I'll pass it to you and just let me know what of that, like if any of that vibes with you.
Luke. Yeah, all I have to say is that I'll cut my rant in half because now you said most of what I was going to say. I agree with pretty much everything you said. We were getting into this in the first part, episodes 1 through 4, where I was questioning a lot of the world building, a lot of how things work, and it was making me confused. And some of it, Kathleen especially, let me know that if I would have done a nice rewatch of season one, it would have been okay. Other things were definitely founded where there were some issues.
Mhm.
But basically, my thoughts, besides what you said, Luke, to start off, where it's super entertaining fantasy show. I enjoyed it 100%. Episodes 5 through 8, I had a great time binging. I think that this is a perfect show to binge.
Mhm.
I don't need this show to be week to week. We talk a lot about how we do see the value in week to week. And we talked about it for a lot of the shows that have been happening recently. The Last of Us, House of the Dragon, Succession, those shows, they just nail it when it's week to week. I think Shadow and Bone, I don't want to say like surface level entertainment, but it's one of those kind of shows where I'm just like, this is a nice, entertaining binge. I don't need to think about it week to week too much because I'm going to start getting frustrated. Now, my little joke here before my rant was going to be, the famous Al Pacino line. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me right back in, and I was going to have a hot take. And no, I don't think it was going to be a hot take at all. I think that Luke and Paul would agree with my take, and maybe some of the book readers. I have no idea. they would have maybe said it was a hot take. I want to preface this line that I just said, pull me back in, with saying that the first thing is my preconceived notions of the show were two things. Number one, I knew it was 3 books. Number two, I assumed, and this could be wrong, it was just my own preconceived notion that, just like you said, Luke, Alina's story ends when the Darkling story ends. I was ready to bet all the money in the world that at least if Alina's story was continuing, then one of the two, meaning the Darkling or the Fold, would still be a thing after season 2. And the pull me back in thing is the Crows, they got me. I'm good. I'm always down with the Crows. Alina's story, until like 20 minutes left in the finale, I was like, she needs to be done. Her story's over. Make it a Crow show after season 2. The pull me back in part. Nikolai's part, I like it. Okay. He's the man. He's going to have some kind of shadow touch thing that we're going to have to get into. And now he's part of Alina's story because they're obviously two parts of one nation, king and queen, whatever they're going to do. Then the shadow cut pulled me back in again. You know, we have to assume it's her using the Mirzos to bring Mal back. I don't know any of this if it's canon. It just seems like it's off book to me. Like you said, Luke, it just seems like they are starting to blend stuff and starting to go their own way, for better or for worse. I guess I don't know because I'm not a book reader and I don't know what's going to happen the rest of the seasons, but I was interested by the shadow cut because she does the light cut to kill the Darkling, and the shadow cut with like the little face at the end to finish the season. It pulled me back in.
A little smirk. She got a nice little smirk going.
And there's no way that you could say if those two things didn't happen, they would have had to keep Alina in because she's the main character, but it was just going to turn to straight up like a political show. But we know how much you love that, Luke, and that could be interesting, but I just can't see how that could be a full season unless it's literally an entire season of the Crows and we get some flashes of Alina and Nikolai and how they're rebuilding Ravka and stuff like that. So adding the stuff at the end, whether it's in the books or not, I have no idea. Nikolai having the shadow touch, Alina with the dark cut, that brought me back in where I'm interested in her story still. But the fact that her and Mal split up and Inej going with Mal, it just seems like that was another preconceived notion that they never really mixed, the Crows and Alina, and they've done that pretty well in the past 2 seasons. But with Inej going with Mal, and we'll get into Mal's storyline later, that just seems like from this moment on, they're making shit up for the show. And again, for better, for worse, we'll find out. Like I said, I enjoyed it. It was very entertaining. We're going to get into some specific things, but I was really ready to say, like, no more Lena. I don't care. I don't need any more of her until the very last 20 minutes or so when we get I mean, fully, they could have just said, Mal's never leaving, and then don't do the shadow cut, and don't do the, I don't know. You could do the Nikolai thing because I love Nikolai, but like, don't do the shadow cut. Mal doesn't leave. They go off and live a happily ever after, and give me the Crows for the rest of Shadow and Bone and some Nikolai story, and we're good.
That's a great point because I feel the same way and I didn't get a chance to say that. But this is a good moment for us to bring up, if you're a listener and you haven't heard, I'm 99% sure they greenlit a spinoff of this series and it's going to be specifically about the Crows. I don't think we talked about that last podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's in the works.
Okay, cool.
And I'm not sure how that's going to really work with Inej being part of Mal's storyline here. Like, is it basically just going to be a refocus where the Crows are going to be the center and Alina and Mal will be like side character? I don't really know how it's going to work, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to lean heavily into the Crows because they know how much the fandom actually gravitates towards this side of the story. So that, just keep that in the back of your mind, because that's going to be that. I don't know how that's going to fit in with Shadow and Bone season 3. I don't know if it's going to happen in between. I don't know if it's going to be a flashback, flash forward. Either way, we are going to get more of the Crows regardless.
Yeah,
cool. I like it.
They know what the people want. The people love the Crows. Like Luke said, we really did enjoy the show. We've been talking about a little bit of, kind of what we disliked or was holding us back from being a great show. But overall, we do really enjoy it. And man, you nailed it. The characters are so fun. It's so fun to watch them interact with different pairings and going off. Like each could have their own episode and be great together. And I think what it boils down to, for me at least, is Brandon Sanderson actually has what he calls the Sanderson's laws of magic. And the first law is that the ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader / watcher understands said magic. So with that being said, we've constantly had questions up in the air. What is the extent of their ability? What are their limitations? Then they start talking about amplifiers, and we're like, well, how much does an amplifier actually do? And I'm sure this is way better explained in the books. And like Luke said, we were just kind of sprinting through because 8 episodes is, 8 hours is a lot, but for some reason it seems like there could have been 10 or more. But I think the lack of ability to fully comprehend the magic and what it can and can't do is kind of what was holding it back from being great. Because there was a million times where like somebody standing in front of Nina and I'm like, dude, just 5 seconds, heart rend, that'll be it. And Luke said it a million times. Heart renders they got to be just so hard to portray in the show because how are they? Some are OP, some aren't, but we don't know what the training is to like make them stronger. And I guess that was the hard part.
To play off exactly with what you just said there, I think how I rationalize this show in my head and why I am okay with all of this is because it really is the show about fun, cool plot things happening and awesome characters, with fantasy being more of a backdrop where it's less of a focus. Because it's surface level when it comes to writing about the magic and all that stuff. And, we love the deep dive, but if you refocus the lens into accepting and going into the show that it is going to be a little bit less meticulous with the details of the magic, it gets a lot better. But I will say they did it in the second half of this season. So literally the episodes we're about to talk about, they did give us a little bit more of magic, small science versus magic, that stuff, and like the powers and like the amplifiers. We finally got this, even though we probably should have gotten this even as far back as season 1, right? Like to give a better base understanding. But yeah, that, because the powers are so overpowered and underpowered at the same time that it doesn't make any sense. Like everybody's should be OP. You can rip people's water out of their body if you want, but at the same time, if you're a heart render, you just get destroyed because people grab your wrists. Like a lot of that is where it's like tough to kind of be consistent. And that's been a consistent complaint from us from the beginning. So that's nothing new. And I hold that, like I already knew that going into the season, we probably weren't going to get more specifics around heart renders and why they're not all OP and stuff. So we'll just put a pin in that because I kind of already grew to accept that. But yeah, it's really just more about the characters for me. And that's why this is going to I'm going to walk away from the show giving it like a, 7.5 out of 10, 8 out of 10, if on like, for some of the highlights, but probably closer to like 7.5. Solid show. I'm really hoping it gets picked up for a season 3 because Jimmy, like you said, I'm with you. Like the Alina stuff at the end did it for me, even though like her story in general doesn't really do it for me compared to the Crows. But we did enough where I'm definitely hoping it gets signed for season 3.